Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller with you, and we have a return guest, and it's someone who obviously does a lot of reading if you look at the books behind him. Welcome, David Housewright.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you. And David also does a little writing as well as a lot of reading. And we've interviewed him several times over several books, not necessarily on Zoom, but the last couple have been on Zoom, thanks to COVID. But by way of introduction, I wanted to give a little bit of background about David Housewright that we haven't really covered fully, and then we'll get to his latest book. But he graduated the University of St. Thomas. He's won the Edgar Award, one of the most prestigious writing awards. He's won 3 Minnesota Book Awards. He has been nominated for a Shamus Award, which is legendary in mystery writing. And he's been president of the Private Eye Writers of America, among other things. Now, with that said, in his first job as an editor of a newspaper, in that case, he was fired. And yet he has gone on to this prestigious career. So David, tell us a little bit about why were you fired as an editor-in-chief of a newspaper?
We're going way back in history here, man. I was a junior at Cretin High School. Now, this was back when Cretin High School was an all-boys Catholic military school, junior ROTC. We were all in uniform. We were all, being ordered about by military.
We're seeing a different side of you already than in our other interviews. So here we have this Irish Catholic uniformed ROTC cadet, editor of the paper, and obviously somebody didn't like something that you were doing.
Well, what happened was, and I'm doing this in 1972. Now, by the way, Cretin changed quickly after a couple of years. After I graduated, they merged with Durham Hall. The military became an elective instead of a all-inclusive thing. And it's really a very different school now than what it was. I'm telling you this because I can't think most of your readers will remember Cretan back and then. This is 40 years ago, over 40 years ago.
This is before Joe Mauer starred at
Oh,
Cretan.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Although Paul Molitor was there when I was there. I remember shooting baskets with Paul.
Okay.
This would be, anyway. I was my junior year in 1972, which was the height of the Vietnam War. And I was the editor of the school paper. And we were going to print an anti-war editorial. Now, full disclosure, I didn't write this. Anyway, our advisor, Mr. Wolf, he said, no, that's not going to happen. So we took it out of the paper and we wrote a substitute editorial. Now, back in those days, everything was offset printing, and you would actually literally paste your stories onto a sheet about the size of the newspaper, and then you would bring it to the press, and then they would print it, and this is how it worked.
I can go you one up on that one. When I was at Syracuse, everything was done by hot lead.
Oh,
and we used to actually, for the Syracuse Daily Orange, we would have to put hot lead in and watch it pour. As a matter of fact, I still have a scar on my arm where hot lead jumped out once and it hit me. And it's left a permanent scar on my arm. But so you were much more modern than that at Cretan. You only had to paste.
yeah.
You,
Anyway, so I'm driving. I'm taking.
Go ahead.
I'm taking the paper, our mock-ups, to the printer. And on the way, I started thinking about the editorial, and I put it back. Now, I wish I could tell you that I did this because of my vehement opposition to the Vietnam War, or war in general, or any moral cause, but it's not true. I did it because it was a better story. I did it because it was better written and it was more interesting. And that's why I put it back. This was like a Thursday or something. On Monday, the paper came out and it was immediately confiscated. I was fired. The newspaper was shut down, and I was more or less brought up on charges. They were going to court-martial me. They were going to throw me out of school. And fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. And they're like, all right. But this literally changed my life, because like a week after this happened, the chairman of the what was then the College of St. Thomas Journalism Department, Father James Whalen, called me. And he was recruiting me to join to go to St. Thomas in the journalism department. Okay. I hadn't actually thought that far ahead, but all right. People are actually asking me to come to a school. I can be talking to that. So I tell my father, this is what I'm going to do, which came as a surprise to him. He thought I was going to follow in his footsteps and become a business guy. But he was cool, and he told me that there were plenty of ditch diggers with journalism degrees. So I should go out and get some practical experience to go with the degree. It didn't occur to me until years later to ask him how the hell he knew how many journalism majors were digging ditches, but that's beside the point. So I started applying all over town, all over the Twin Cities, for any kind of writing job, any kind of job dealing with editing and publishing and whatever. And I ended up at the Minneapolis Tribune, and I filled out an application, and the guy was very cool. And he said, listen, and it was an application for being basically what we called a copy boy back then, and then a copy aide, and I don't even know if they exist anymore, because back then we were, they had the teletype machines, and we were the guys who tore the story off the teletype machine and ran it across the room to the editor and all that stuff. Anyway, so I applied for this job, and the guy was very cool. He says, "You're not going to get this job. There are college graduates who are not going to get this job. But you keep working at it. We'll keep you on file, and you come back, and we'll see how things go." And I go, "Okay, fine." I go home. It's 2 p.m. The phone rings, and it's Larry Batson, and he was the editor of the sports department at what was then the Minneapolis Tribune. This is 4 or 5 years before it merged with the Star. And he says, "We need a guy, and we need him right away. You want the job?" And I said, "Sure. When do you need me?" He said, 4 o'clock. This is 2. And I go, "Yeah, I'm your guy. I'll be there." He goes, "Okay." And then right before he hangs up the phone, he says, "By the way, are you that kid who got fired from the newspaper job at Cretin?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, I'll see you at 4."
So it's
So
a
this
good thing.
started my professional journalism career.
It's a good thing you were almost a liberal. now, now I'll tell you something else, that you and I are really alums of the same institution, because earlier than you, for a summer when I was at Syracuse in the journalism school, I was here as a copy boy at the Minneapolis Tribune.
Really?
Before it joined with the Star and became the Star Tribune. The sports editor was a fellow by the name of Lou Green, which is before your time.
Yeah.
And Carl Rowan was a well-known columnist, one of the first Black and really nationally prominent columnists, was a terrific guy. And he took really great care of me as a copy boy from the usual abuse that I got from some of the editors. So here we are, and we didn't know this. We've known each other for years now, and we didn't know this. So this is a lot more fun than talking about your books. Because
oh, thank you. Thanks for throwing that out.
Speaking of your books, let's talk about the latest. What Doesn't Kill Us?
Okay.
And I assume that that's the latest. That's the latest one that I've read. And
well, the last time I talked to you was when From the Grave was about to come out.
Right. And we talked about From the Grave. And since we talked about it in advance, which was more of a psychological effort than I've read in some of your others. But in What Doesn't Kill Us, your hero, the focus of the book, Rushmore McKenzie, starts the book in a coma. And he's in a coma for almost the entire book. Mm-hmm. So how did you deal with that? It opens with him saying, "I was shot in the back and I'm in a coma."
Yeah, well, basically, the first line was, "I was shot in the back at close range by a .32 caliber handgun, yet did not die, at least not permanently." Yeah. And the first page and a half dealt with the fact that he was shot and the fact that they put him in the coma because he coded twice and they were afraid of brain damage and things like this. And he actually died for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And here, this is what you're doing.
Oh, you've got it also. So we both have it.
You're showing nothing.
Anyway, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to deal with DNA. I wanted to deal with identity, who we think we are based on where we think we came from and all of this sort of thing. And it occurred to me as I'm trying to plot out the book that I can't tell that story in Mackenzie's voice, because that would just change the character. I mean, he is his father's son. He is his mother's son. He has this history for 17 books prior to this. So I can't tell that story in his voice. And I thought, well, maybe I should write a standalone as a third person. But I couldn't get it out of my head as I was working on a different story, which dealt with investment fraud and things of that nature. And then it occurred to me, well, what if he's telling somebody else's story? I read a book called The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham, God, 100 years ago. And he has a whole section in this book, a whole, like 100 pages or some outrageous thing, where he's telling the story about this guy in a third person voice, even though the book is written in first person. And he covers it by telling the reader, basically, this is what was told to me. And then he writes it. And I thought, gee, I might be able to get away with something like that. So I gave it a try, and I allowed all these these other characters to do all the things they did. And God, there were a lot of characters. I have been criticized for having too many characters.
Yeah, there were a lot of characters in that book. And,
yeah, but they were all brought together through this same point.
And we should mention that What Doesn't Kill Us is available now at your favorite bookstore and at Amazon and Barnes and Noble and online, etc.
It also came out in audiobook. All my Mackenzie books are available in audio now.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, a guy named Brent Hinckley, a New York actor, did the voice for all of the books, and he's been on everything from Silence of the Lambs to Seinfeld. He's one of those guys that you've seen in like 300 shows, but you never remember his name until you see him.
You don't know who he is.
Yeah, that guy. Anyway, that's what I did, and it's the response has been very interesting. I've had critics who didn't like it at all. I had one critic who said, well, Housewright, after 25 books, has finally run out of ideas. And here I thought this was a great idea. I thought, oh man, this is going to work. I have other people who were very pleased to see all these characters that came from previous books come together. So it's been an interesting.
His good friend, Lieutenant Bobby Dunstan, carries a good part of the book.
Yes.
In terms of trying to find out who shot him. And you have an antagonist there, the female detective, Jean Shipman, and she doesn't like Mackenzie at all, but she's assigned to the case and she's got to work on it. And her own personal pride drives her forward to get a solution. So you have the elements of what you need in your writing right there, and sure. It worked for me. I'm not a critic; I'm a reader and a fan, so you can discount that. But it certainly was a different take, and I was fascinated with how you did it. I didn't know that you reached back for something that you remembered from years ago, and I thought it worked.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I enjoyed it too.
Yes.
Sharon is right here, and she thought it worked also.
Oh, thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
So that's too. The dog hasn't read it yet because she just had an operation, so she's not reading. She's recovering.
I hope she does well.
Yeah. She tore a ligament. She won't tell me how she did it, but it's a shame because she had a chance to pitch for the Twins, and now she's out on the injured list.
Well, she'll recover, get a couple of games in at the Saints, and see if she can,
That's it. So you were a sports reporter, among other things.
Yeah, I loved it.
And you also did a lot of other things. You were involved in advertising agencies,
Oh, yeah.
someplace after the Star Tribune, in advertising agencies, and you had your own advertising agency for a while.
I did.
So that you're now teaching.
From time to time. It's not a steady gig. People say, hey,
you really haven't found anything that's going to anchor you. Is that it?
I like this.
Oh, okay.
This is what I enjoy most. I've had a very fun ride. Working for the Tribune. Then I went to the Grand Forks Herald when the Tribune merged with the Star, and they were cutting bodies. So I was not going to be there. And then I drifted in advertising, and I worked as a copywriter, and I directed TV spots and radio spots. And you
also won a lot of writing awards in your advertising. You won a Clio, which is the Emmy of advertising.
I did, and it was fun, and it was a good time. But in my head, the books were always nagging at me, because I've always wanted to write books. And, you talk about history. I invented self-publishing. You're welcome. When I was about 10 or 11, no older than 12 anyway, my parents, for reasons that remain baffling to me, gave me a hand-cranked printing press for Christmas. And it was one of those things where you punch out the words letter by letter. And then you tape it to the drum. And then you ink it up and you run the sheets out. And I used it to write a book called Swinging Danger. And it was about a kid, young adult novel. It was about a kid who builds a rope swing, what we used to call a Tarzan swing, even though everybody told him he was going to fall and break his neck. And he did fall, and he broke his wrist. And like all first novels, it was highly autobiographical. And it was 8 pages, not counting the cover. And I sold these for like 15 cents a piece, which was real money back then. This is the 60s. I literally sold them in the neighborhood to neighbors, to people I knew. And that was it for me. I became that guy, and I just started wanting to write books. And
that's where you picked up your first agent, I bet. Well, maybe not.
No. But yeah, so when I was working in advertising, I had my own shop. I started writing my first book with whatever free time I had. And then when it came out and it did fairly well, my wife said, hey, pick a lane, pick something. You want to do this, you want to do that. And we could do it fine. We'll freelance. We'll make it work. And
speaking of your wife, Renee, she still hasn't come on the show, even though I've invited her a couple of times. And she's a well-known, among other things, critic, a theater critic.
Yeah.
And she's still welcome on the show.
I keep telling her that.
Well, I'm going to send her another email. Okay. And maybe we can embarrass her into coming on the show. And in any event, what's in the hopper at the moment?
I have 2 books in the pipeline. I have one Mackenzie, which will be out next May, I think. I don't actually have a pub date. I also have another Mackenzie. Did I say Mackenzie? Let me rephrase that. I have a Mackenzie coming out in May, and I have another Holland Taylor
I
which
was
is
going to ask you about Holland Taylor because we haven't seen Holland Taylor for a while.
well, I did the first 3 books, and then I started doing Mackenzie and a couple of standalones, and then I came back to him and I did 2 books. But anyway, there's a 6th, and that's in the pipeline too. And I hope to bring that out early to mid next year as well. So that's where we're at.
Okay, how did you do during the pandemic? Because life for a writer is different than the rest of the world because you're normally working alone anyway.
Yeah. Well, in that regard, it didn't really make much difference, but I like to get out there. I liked when I do the research, I like to go to the places that are in the book. I like to actually, have a coffee in the shop that I'm writing about, or, get out amongst the people, if you will. And almost all my research was done by phone. I mean, you can do things on Google and that, but it's not that trustworthy. So you like to talk to people and get out there, and that was tough, but it wasn't, God, I didn't have to worry about my job. I didn't have to worry about, getting infected or anything. So yeah, I have no complaints. It was fine for me. I didn't have to I work at home, but I didn't have to, if that makes sense to you.
Right, right. And what's interesting is we've sort of traced your career. This is what I was hoping. I discussed this interview with Sharon before today. I say, we normally get him on and then we talk about his book and his latest book and things like that. And that's all fine. And it's all well and good and interesting. But let's get a little bit more of who David Housewright is. And we got a lot of that today. And I'm really pleased that we see that he's a failed soldier, among other things.
Soldier, junior ROTC, never mind.
Oh, I was in ROTC at Syracuse in the Air Force.
Okay.
And yeah, I was in the band, so that was the best of both worlds. As a snare drummer, not only in the university band, I also had my own dance band back then. But
really?
That's how you earn nickels and dimes.
What did you play?
Pardon?
What did you play?
All over Long Island.
No, not where. What was your
drums?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I'm a failed drummer. Although I did sit in with a band in Mexico about 3 years ago. And
really?
Yeah,
very cool.
The wrists have lost a little in that period.
Flexibility?
No flexibility. Anyway, we've got to continue this, but it's going to have to be in another interview. And we've got to get Renee on. We've been talking to the author and award-winning novelist, David Housewright. David, thank you so much. And thanks so much for an interesting interview where we talked about more than the latest book, What Doesn't Kill Us. It's out now and you can get it. And it's really a fascinating read. David, thanks again.
Thank you.